How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow is she, who was great among the nations. The princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into captivity, under affliction and hard servitude. She dwells among the nations. She finds no rest. All her persecutors overtake her in dire straits. The roads to Zion mourn, because no one comes to the set feasts. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Her adversaries have become the master, or the head. Her enemies prosper, for the Lord has afflicted her because of the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone into captivity before the enemy. And from the daughter of Zion, all her splendor has departed. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture, that flee without strength before the pursuer. In the days of her affliction and roaming, Jerusalem remembers all her pleasant things that she had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy with no one to help her. The adversaries saw her and mocked at her downfall. Jerusalem has sinned gravely, therefore she has become vile. All who honored her despise her, because they have seen her nakedness. Yet she sighs and turns away. Her uncleanness is in her skirts. She did not consider her destiny. Therefore her collapse was awesome. She had no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy is exalted. The adversary has spread his hand over all her pleasant things, for she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary, those whom you commanded not to enter your assembly. All her people sigh, they seek bread. They have given their valuables for food to restore life. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am scorned. It is nothing to you, all you who pass by. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Behold and see, if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which has been brought on me, which the Lord has inflicted in the day of his fierce anger. From above he has sent fire into my bones, and it overpowered them. He has spread a net for my feet and turned me back. He has made me desolate and faint all the day. The yoke of my transgressions was bound. They were woven together by his hands and thrust upon my neck. He made my strength fall. The Lord delivered me into the hands of those whom I am not able to withstand. The Lord has trampled underfoot all my mighty men in my midst. He has called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord trampled as in a winepress the virgin daughter of Judah. For these things I weep. My eye overflows with water, because the Comforter who should restore my life is far from me. My children are desolate, because the enemy prevailed. Zion spreads out her hands, but no one comforts her. The Lord has commanded concerning Jacob that those around him become his adversaries. Jerusalem has become an unclean thing among them. The Lord is righteous, for I rebelled against his commandment. Hear now, all peoples, and behold my sorrow. My virgins and my young men have gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and my elders breathed their last in the city, while they sought food to restore their life. See, O Lord, that I am in distress. My soul is troubled. My heart is overturned within me. For I have been very rebellious. Outside the sword bereaves. At home it is like death. They have heard that I sigh, but no one comforts me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They are glad that you have done it. Bring on the day that you have announced, that they may become like me. Let all their wickedness come before you, and do to them as you have done to me, for all my transgressions. For my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. Amen. So I feel sad when I think about the church. When I think about what she is, the body of Christ, his bride, the temple where God is to dwell on earth, where God is to be found on earth, and where she finds herself, contemptuous before men and before Christians, torn with schism and scandal and heresy, weakened members, dying congregations, rarely revered, a laughingstock among the nation and nations. And there are flickers of hope, and we have to have hope. We talk about in this country that there is a slight rise in the evangelical churches, even if the Church of England is dying, but it really is quite slight when you consider the scale of the country, the influence that the church once had. You just have to go outside and take the temperature and be honest about where we are. Just about every single person you meet is not a Christian, thinks that faith is ridiculous. The church once ruled in the universities and in the state, in the government, and the major institutions of the land, and yet today to say that you're a Christian is to just about say that you are an ignorant leper, like a Neanderthal or something of the sort. We are a church in crisis. And there are few books as relevant as these laments that are offered up from the smouldering ashes of Jerusalem, the smouldering ashes of the covenant people of God who finally, through their unfaithfulness, have faced God's chastisement and justice to speak into our distress as the covenant people of God. As we go through this book of laments, it's made up of 4 poems and 1 prayer at the end. We're going to focus in each section on the Lord and how we can take hold of him for our present condition. The first idea here is that the Lord is watching. The Lord is watching. So beginning here, my first point, verse 12, is there any sorrow like my sorrow? One of the paradoxical beauties of these poems is that they give voice to the deepest groans of the human soul. Jerusalem is like a widow in verse 1, lonely. She weeps bitter tears at night, like a mother bereft, verse 5, of her children who have gone into exile. Her streets are empty, verse 1. The roads that were once lined with jubilant worshippers in verse 4 are silent and desolate. The roads themselves are in mourning in Jerusalem. Like the fool, she has played the field in verse 2. She has been an unfaithful wife to her husband. And now she is abandoned by friends and lovers, found in her disgrace. She is utterly humiliated and humbled. She is publicly paraded around in verse 8 in nakedness. At times when cities fell and armies were defeated, the women would be stripped naked and paraded in the streets. You saw some of that in the October 7th attacks, that our press and our people are quick to forget the barbarity that was done. I think about my own mother or my wife or my daughter being paraded naked in the streets. Can you imagine the pain and the agony of such a sight? And yet such has been done in Jerusalem to God's daughters. She is played with fire in her skirt, verse 9. She is like a young and scandalous woman who has gone out and played with lovers, but she's bitten off more than she can chew. And she turns out devastated in verse 10, because filthy hands have touched what is most precious, and she has been penetrated in her sacred places. And if you have any sensitivity, you can understand what the lamenter is saying. What has been done to Jerusalem? The most holy place has been touched where it ought not. Such has been done to the daughter of God. And she is hungry. She is so hungry. Her noblemen, in verse 19, her elders and priests have perished. Parents have traded, verse 11, their most valuable possessions for food. They have traded their children for food. Some have eaten their children. Some have passed their children to others who might sustain their children's lives as they themselves perish from the famine and the starvation that has come to them. Can you imagine anything worse? Her princes, in verse 6, are hunted like a deer. Her young men, verse 15, are slain. The princess of God, verse 1, has become a slave. The dream of Israel, verse 3, has died and gone back to Egypt. Is there any sorrow like her sorrow, whose eyes weep, in verse 16, with overflowing water, because the Comforter who would restore her life has vanished from her, who is in deep distress, in verse 20. See, O Lord, that I am in distress. My soul is troubled. My heart is overturned within me. If nothing else, we can say this, that there is a place for you within God's vision for the world. You can name your sorrow its cause, and you can find your place here. There is a place for the church, however weakened and corrupted and torn down, however far along the way of God's judgment and destruction she has gone, whatever the fault, irrespective of the vilest offenses, we, all of us, can find our place here in the laments of Jeremiah. Come, all you sorrowful, and enter the laments of Jerusalem. That's the invitation. Is there any sorrow like my sorrow? There is no sorrow that cannot find its place within the laments of the people as they stand traumatized by the destructions that have fallen upon them. It gets worse, secondly. And I am to blame. What happened to Jerusalem is not bad luck. It's not misfortune. Nor is it the common pains of a fallen world. It is the justice of God. Jerusalem was the city that was set upon a hill. God's delight, God's dwelling place. He had redeemed her from Egypt. He had nurtured her, provided for her. He loved her dearly. And all that the Lord ever asked from Israel was her love. But instead she, like an adulterous woman, verse 2, has gone after her lovers, both nations and idols. She would not trust in the Lord. This comes to something of a head under the king Manasseh, who sets up foreign altars, who brings the priests of Baal into the courts of God, who sets up an idol in God's house and cult prostitutes, who causes the children to pass through the fire, child sacrifice in Israel in the valley of Hinnom. And she has been warned by covenant. She has been warned by the prophets. She has been warned by providence. She saw the fall of Samaria for all of her sins, but she would not turn from her idolatry. She would not turn from her stiff-necked ways. She continued in her rebellion, and she knows it. Whereas nobody wants to hear it, notice in this lament that there is no attempt to hide, minimize, or blame others for what has happened. as you go through the poem in talking of finding no rest and the return to Egypt in verse 3, of desolation in verse 4, of adversaries becoming the head in verse 5, of captivity, starvation, the ravishing of women, triumph and scoffing of the nations in verse 21, of the yoke that is placed upon her neck in verse 14. What the poem is doing is drawing on the Deuteronomic curses. Deuteronomy chapter 28, and I'll just read a few in verse 30. You shall betroth a wife, but another man shall lie with her. Verse 32, your sons and daughters shall be given to another people, and your eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no strength in your hand. Verse 36, the Lord will bring you and the king whom you set over you to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. Verse 37, you shall be an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all the nations where the Lord will drive you. Verse 41, you shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity. Verse 44, your enemies shall be your head, and you shall be the tail. Verse 48, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord will send against you, in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, in need of everything, and he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. Verse 52, they shall besiege you at all your gates until your high and fortified walls in which you trust come down throughout all your land. They shall besiege you at all your gates throughout all your land, which the Lord your God has given you. Verse 63, and it shall be that just as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and bring you to nothing. And you shall be plucked from off the land which you go to possess. Verse 65, and among the nations you shall find no rest, nor shall the soles of your foot have a resting place. But there the Lord will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul. Your life shall hang in doubt before you. You shall fear day and night, and have no assurance of life. And the Lord will take you back to Egypt in ships, by the way of which he said, you shall never see it again, and yet here we are. And there you shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Do you see that the poem is deliberately taking on the language of the Deuteronomic curses, as though the lamenter is saying that God is justly punishing me for my sin. That's what the lamenter is saying. And we have it explicitly in verse 5. Her adversaries have become the master, her enemies prosper, for the Lord afflicted her because of the multitude of her transgressions. In verse 12, is it nothing to all you who pass by? Behold and see, is there any sorrow like my sorrow, which the Lord has brought on me, which the Lord has inflicted in the day of his fierce anger? Verse 14, the yoke of my transgressions was bound. They were woven together by his hands and thrust upon my neck. He made my strength fail. The Lord delivered me into the hands of those whom I am not able to withstand. Verse 18, the Lord is righteous, for I rebelled against his word. Hear now, all peoples, and behold my sorrows. God is justly punishing me for my sin. Is there any sorrow like my sorrow? And yet, says the lamenter, I am to blame. The Lord has done this to me, and that is absolutely terrifying, because who can withstand the Lord? In verse 15, she recognizes that the Lord who once dwelt within the city walls as her defense has become the slayer within the city walls. What comfort is left then for Jerusalem in verse 16? Because the very God who would comfort her is now her adversary. He has turned his face against her because of her sins. And we might not want to go there, and we might hate the fact that we deserve hard things, and our society hates the idea that anybody deserves hard things. But it is totally worth it, and here's why. To be judged is to live in a world of justice. To be judged for our sins is to live in a world of justice. And that's where the poem ends in verses 21 and verse 22. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They are glad that you have done it. Bring on the day that you have announced, that they may become like me. Let all their wickedness come before you, and do to them as you have done to me. For all my transgressions, for my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. And that could sound like it is a desire for vengeance, and perhaps there's something of that there. But more than this, I think it is a hopeful joy of knowing this, that one day every wrong will be set right, that wickedness will be wiped from the face of the earth. If Jerusalem, if God's own daughter should be punished for her sins, then we can rest assured that God will punish all men and all women for their sins. And I want this. Even if it means I have to see things about myself that I don't like, if I have to see things about myself that I am not yet, I want this. I might hate who I am, but I could not bear to live in a world where that is not acknowledged by God. I could not bear to live in a world where there was no final and no ultimate justice. But there is. The very chastisement of God points to the justice of the Lord, that one day all wrongs will be set right. Even if we must be punished because we have sinned against the Lord, there is a comfort in knowing that one day all wrongs will be punished. But also the first step to any kind of cure is to understand the cause. We want to understand the cure to any kind of disease. We must understand the root cause. And it would do little good for us to look, as we are often tempted, only to our enemies and to our privations and to the perversions of the culture around us, if indeed the Lord stands behind them and has permitted them because of our own sinfulness. See, here's what Jerusalem does. Jerusalem is able to look up beyond the Babylonians to the Lord himself, to their lives and practice before him, and recognize his hand in it all. If we could do the same, whether as people, as a church, that we can at least hold out our sin-ravished hearts and sanctuaries and counsels to God, because who can tell if he will have mercy and cure our disease? But if we continue to tell ourselves that we are only suffering because of others, we are only suffering because of the time in which we find ourselves, the church is only weak because, well, Jesus has said that the world will hate the church. If we cannot look beyond our enemies to the hand of God and ask, has God brought this judgment upon us? Has he bruised and weakened and almost, it seems, abandoned his church because she is an unholy and unchaste and unfaithful bride? Am I suffering in my life because I am, whether I like it or not, an unholy, an unfaithful, and an unchaste saint? It's a hard thing to acknowledge, but I would rather acknowledge the hideousness of my life than live in a world without justice. I'd rather see it, that I might bring it before God and say, God, would you cure me of this illness? Is there any sorrow like my sorrow? And I am to blame. But still, is there any sorrow like my sorrow? You may have made many, many stupid choices in life and be suffering because of them, and they might just stick around. And you can say, well, I am to blame, and you can bring it before the Lord, but nevertheless, still, the poet sits in the destruction of Jerusalem. It doesn't take away the absolute abject misery, the sorrows of this people. Well, thirdly, and this is that key idea, the Lord is watching. In our present crisis, we might ask, does God even care? And this is the anxious longing of the poem. First poem anyway. In verse 2, she weeps bitterly in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks among all her lovers, but she has none to comfort her. Nobody will look on her in her need and have pity. In verse 12, is it nothing to you, all you who pass by, behold and see. Is there any sorrow like my sorrow? Will somebody please just look upon me? I know I deserve this, and I know that I am suffering, but would somebody please turn a glance in my direction and have pity? Verse 17, Zion spreads out her hands, but no one comforts her. Verse 18, hear now all peoples, and behold my sorrow. My virgins and my young men have gone into captivity. Yes, we are here. Yes, we might deserve it. But when nobody else cares, does the Lord still care? Will he still look upon us? Verse 20, see. Nobody else will see. All my friends, all my lovers have abandoned me. But see, O Lord, that I am in distress. That you are my enemy, and you are the one who is punishing, and you are the one who has permitted all of this destruction and misery to fall upon me. See, O Lord, that I am in distress. My soul is troubled, and my heart is overturned within me. Why? Because then the one who once pitied Israel and Egypt, though she was in hard servitude and labor, though she was there because of her idolatry, but still he pitied her. This God might still pity his covenant people. Because if the Lord looks, if the Lord is watching, if the Lord is paying attention, then we have reason to believe that though we find ourselves in sorrow, sorrow will not be the final word. This is the hope of Jerusalem. Will the Lord see? Well, we have the answer in the poem itself. The Spirit of God is literally there. The Spirit of God, through the author, whoever the author is, has captured the groanings on the sacred page. Here, as you read these horrors in chapter 1, you read of how God has registered every blow. How he wants us as the future covenant people to look on and to see her. She's like, will anybody see? And all the church is looking back and saying, we see, because the Spirit has drawn us to look. The Spirit has recorded of all these sorrows. He has gathered your tears as in a jar. And he has looked not merely with judgment, but with sympathy. The images that we find throughout that I went through in the first section are a mixture of things despicable and yet tender and heart-wrenching, of events that are excessive, that go way beyond what is warranted or deserved. You have on one hand the picture of the widow, and she is mourning the loss of her husband. She has nobody to comfort her. The picture of the mother who has lost her children, and yet at the same time you have the picture of the young whore who has went off and played with fire, and yet she is taken by a man and she is violated. And in all of this there is a mixture of disgust and yet at the same time absolute pity and sympathy. And what we're seeing as we read these great and troubling and yet sympathy, heart-stirring pictures is of the heart of God. Like, we look on and on one hand we're like, they deserve it. This is everything that they should have received, and yet at the same time we're like, but isn't it a bit much? And does not my heart still weep for the children of Jerusalem? The heart of God is revealed here. It's so beautiful the way actually that all of these pictures are put together. The widow, the mother, the adulterous bride, the young woman. It's a very beautiful thing because we are before God as complex creatures. I was thinking about this with Anna, that in Lord of the Rings, one of the great characters is Sméagol, is Gollum, because he just so captures the archetypal sinner, the one who is addicted and to his sin and just cannot be helped. And you read him and there are moments, as Tolkien describes him, where he is just utterly contemptible. And yet there are other moments where the heartstrings are pulled and you're sympathetic and you have the Christ-like figure of in the book showing him mercy, but all of the mercy and all of the help that is afforded him and all the opportunities will do him no good. And on one hand, he is just like awful, but on the other, you cannot help but feel sorry for him. God does not delight in the death of the wicked. God does not delight in bringing these covenantal curses upon his people, though he has forborne with them for generation after generation after generation. Still, his sympathies are stirred. Still, he is looking upon his people. We hear the heart of God in the pictures that are used to describe their horrors, but more specifically, the heart of Jesus. You see, in the narrator that describes these events, whether it's Jeremiah or somebody who got his message and understood his message, we have the observations of one who stood in the place of God. Jeremiah was there warning the people. Jeremiah was there suffering because he warned the people, being rejected because he warned the people. Nevertheless, he is also there witnessing the horrors as they unfold. And what do we hear in his recollection and his recalling of these events? There is no sense of "I told you so." When the axe falls, he doesn't want to look, but he also cannot look away. And surely Jesus reveals himself here as the observer, as the true observer. As Jeremiah or one of his disciples looks on and has suffered in warning this people, stood in the place of God, but still is just heartbroken at the devastation of God's people. So Jesus walks these exact same steps. He comes to Jerusalem, just 20, 30 years before the temple will be burned and destroyed again, just razed to the ground by the Romans. He comes to a people warning and cautioning them, but they will not listen, and he suffers more than Jeremiah suffers, and yet still, what does he do? He weeps for Jerusalem. If only you had known this, the day that makes for your peace. How would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Jesus reveals himself in the gospel to be the observer, the lamenter, the one who stands in the ashes of Jerusalem and who does look on, who is watching, who takes note of this sorrow above all sorrows. The message then is this, that even at our most unfaithful, at the height of our betrayal, whilst wallowing in the mess of our own making, as a weakened, broken and corrupted church, or as a wounded and sinful life, the Lord is still watching. The Lord who pitied Israel in Egypt, the Lord who returned the captives from Babylon, the Lord who walked the earth and who forgave from the tree the people who had put him on the tree, the Lord who conquered death, will never look away. And so we have reason to believe that sorrow will not be the final word, because the Lord is watching. Though we may have sorrow upon sorrow for the church, in our own lives we have reason to believe, always to believe, because he looks on, that sorrow will not have the final word. Amen.